Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he walked through the mining tunnels of Kepler 442b. The red dust of the alien planet stuck to everything, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. He had been on this rock for 3 months now, and every day felt the same. Drill, blast, collect minerals, repeat. But today was different. The mining crew had broken through into a chamber that nobody expected to find. The metal detectors had been going crazy all morning, beeping and flashing like Christmas lights. Jake pushed through the narrow opening his team had carved and stepped into something that took his breath away. The chamber was huge, maybe the size of a football field. But what made Jake stop and stare was the thing in the center. It looked like a crystal, but not like any crystal he had ever seen. It was about 10 feet tall and shaped like a twisted tower. The surface was smooth and seemed to glow with its own light. Colors moved across it like oil on water, shifting from blue to green to purple. "Holy cow," whispered Pete Williams, one of the younger miners. "What is that thing?" Jake stepped closer, his boots crunching on the rocky floor. The crystal seemed to pulse like a heartbeat made of light. He had seen a lot of strange things in his 20 years of space mining, but nothing like this. "Get Lisa down here," Jake told Pete, "right now." Lisa Bennett was the chief engineer on their mining ship, the Meridian. She was also the smartest person Jake knew. If anyone could figure out what they were looking at, it was her. 20 minutes later, Lisa came through the opening with her equipment bag and a look of wonder on her face. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been working in space longer than Jake had been alive. "My God," she said, setting down her bag. "It's beautiful." Jake watched as Lisa pulled out her scanner and started taking readings. The device beeped and clicked as it worked. After a few minutes, Lisa frowned and shook the scanner. "This can't be right," she said. "What's wrong?" Jake asked. "The energy readings are off the charts. This thing is putting out more power than our ship's reactor. But it's not dangerous power. I don't know how to describe it. It's like the energy is waiting for something." Jake felt drawn to the crystal. He had felt it from the moment he walked into the chamber. It was like the thing was calling to him. He took another step forward. "Careful," Lisa warned. "We don't know what it might do." But Jake wasn't listening. He was thinking about the music player in his pocket. He always carried it with him on long mining trips. Music helped pass the time in the dark tunnels. He pulled out the small device and looked at it. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked. "Just an idea," Jake said. He scrolled through his music collection and found one of his favorite songs. It was an old piece, a violin solo that always made him think of home. He pressed play. The moment the music started, the crystal changed. The colors became brighter, swirling faster across the surface. Then something amazing happened. The crystal began to sing. It wasn't a voice like a human voice. It was more like the sound of wind through trees or water flowing over rocks, but it was definitely music. The crystal was responding to the violin, creating its own melody that danced around the human song. "Turn it off," Lisa shouted, but Jake couldn't move. The music was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. The violin and the crystal's song wove together like two dancers who had been practicing for years. Then the air above the crystal began to shimmer. At first, Jake thought it was just heat waves, but slowly, shapes began to form. They were like pictures made of light floating in the air above the crystal. The images showed a city unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The buildings were tall and graceful, made of the same material as the crystal. Beings moved through the streets, but they weren't human. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of starlight. They had no mouths, but Jake could somehow sense that they were singing. "Are you seeing this?" Pete whispered. Jake nodded. He couldn't speak. The images were showing him an entire civilization. A civilization that was gone. He could feel it somehow, through the music. These beings were extinct, and this crystal was all that was left of them. The song on his music player ended, and the crystal's melody faded away. The images dissolved, like smoke. The chamber was quiet again except for the sound of their breathing. What just happened? Lisa asked. Jake looked at the crystal, which had returned to its gentle pulsing glow. I think we just met someone, he said. Lisa was already packing up her equipment. We need to get back to the ship. The captain needs to know about this, and we need to contact Earth. But Jake didn't want to leave. The crystal had shown him something incredible, and he wanted to see more. He wanted to understand what had happened to the singing people in the City of Light. 5 more minutes, he said. Jake, we don't know what that thing is capable of. We need to be careful. It's not dangerous, Jake said. He was sure of it. The crystal had felt sad when it showed him the empty city. It was lonely, waiting for someone to listen to its song. Lisa grabbed his arm. How can you know that? Jake looked at the crystal one more time. Because it's been waiting for us. For someone who could hear its music. As they walked back through the tunnels, Jake's mind was racing. He had so many questions. Who were the singing people? What had happened to them? And why did the crystal respond to human music? Behind them, the crystal continued to pulse in the darkness, its light reflecting off the rocky walls. It had been waiting for millions of years for someone to find it. Someone who could appreciate music the way its creators had. Now that someone had come, the crystal began to wake up from its long sleep. There were things it needed to tell them. Important things about the danger that was coming. The same danger that had destroyed the singing people so long ago, but first it needed to hear more of their music. Dr. Amanda Wells arrived on Kepler 442b 3 days after Jake's discovery. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and hands that were always moving when she talked. Amanda had spent her whole life studying dead civilizations, but she had never seen anything like what Jake showed her in the chamber. The construction is incredible, she said, running her fingers along the crystal's surface. Look at these patterns. They're not random. This is language, but not written language. It's musical. Language. Jake stood beside her, watching the colors dance under the crystal's surface. He had been back to the chamber every day since the discovery. Each time he played music, the crystal showed him new images. Cities, forests, oceans full of strange creatures. All of it was beautiful, and all of it was gone. What do you think happened to them? Jake asked. Amanda pulled out her notebook and started sketching the symbols she saw in the crystal. I think they communicated entirely through sound. Music wasn't just art to them. It was how they talked, how they shared ideas, how they lived. Lisa Bennett was setting up her equipment on the other side of the chamber. She had been working non-stop since the discovery, trying to understand how the crystal worked. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases, she called out. But I think I'm starting to understand. This isn't just one crystal. It's millions of tiny crystals all working together, like a computer made of music. Jake pulled out his music player again. He had been experimenting with different songs, trying to see what would get the biggest reaction from the crystal. Classical music worked well, but rock and jazz made it pulse faster. Folk songs seemed to calm it down. Try this one, he said, selecting a violin piece by a young street performer he had seen videos of back on Earth. The girl couldn't have been more than 12, but she played like she had been born with the violin in her hands. The moment the music started, the crystal came alive. The colors swirled faster than Jake had ever seen them. The humming sound it made was different too, more excited somehow. The air above the crystal shimmered, and new images began to form. This time, Jake saw the beings more clearly. They were graceful and moved like dancers. Their skin really did look like starlight, shifting between silver and gold. They had large eyes that seemed to see everything, and when they communicated, their whole bodies glowed with different colors. My God, Amanda whispered, they're beautiful. The images showed the beings in what looked like a concert hall. Hundreds of them sat in circles, their bodies pulsing with light as they sang together. But Jake realized they weren't just singing. They were creating something. The air above them filled with geometric patterns made of pure sound. They're building something, Lisa said, watching the patterns form and change. Using music as a tool The crystal song grew more complex, weaving around the violin melody like it was trying to teach them something. Jake felt like he was standing at the edge of understanding something huge, but he couldn't quite grasp it. Then the images changed. The concert hall was still there, but now it was empty. The geometric patterns were broken, scattered like puzzle pieces. The beings were gone. What happened? Jake asked, but the crystal had no answer. The images faded and the chamber was quiet again. Amanda was writing furiously in her notebook. I think this crystal is some kind of memory storage. Like a library, but instead of books it stores experiences. Musical experiences. But why is it responding to our music? Lisa asked. We're not the same species. We shouldn't be able to activate their technology. Jake had been thinking about this too. Maybe music is universal. Maybe it doesn't matter what species you are. If you can create harmony, you can communicate with this thing. Amanda looked up from her notebook. That's a fascinating theory. But if that's true, then why hasn't anyone else found technology like this? We've been exploring space for decades. Maybe we're the first species they've encountered that makes music like this, Jake said. Complex music, emotional music. Lisa's equipment started beeping. She frowned and checked her readings. The energy output is increasing. Whatever we're doing, it's waking the crystal up more each time. Jake was about to play another song when they heard footsteps in the tunnel. Captain Ryan Hayes emerged from the opening, followed by 2 other crew members. Ryan was a big man with gray hair and a voice that commanded respect. Dr. Wells, he said, nodding to Amanda. I need a full report on what you found here. Amanda stood up and brushed dust off her clothes. Captain, I believe we've discovered a repository of memories from an extinct civilization. They called themselves... Well, I'm not sure what they called themselves, but they communicated through music. Ryan looked at the crystal with the expression of a man who had seen too many impossible things in his career. And it responds to human music? Not just responds, Jake said. It interacts with it. It's like it's trying to have a conversation. A conversation about what? Jake exchanged glances with Amanda and Lisa. They had all been thinking the same thing, but nobody had wanted to say it out loud. I think it's trying to warn us about something, Amanda said finally. The images it shows us, the civilization, didn't just die out naturally. Something destroyed them. Ryan's expression darkened. What kind of something? We don't know yet, Lisa said. But whatever it was powerful enough to wipe out an entire species that had technology we can barely understand. Ryan walked closer to the crystal. And you think this thing is trying to warn us about the same threat? It's possible, Amanda said. If music is truly universal, then maybe the crystal recognizes something in us that was in its creators. The ability to create, to make beauty from sound? Jake pulled out his music player again. There's someone I want to bring down here, Elena Rodriguez, from the entertainment crew. She plays violin. If this thing responds to human music, maybe it will respond even better to live music. Ryan nodded slowly. Do it. But I want security teams monitoring this chamber around the clock. If this crystal is trying to warn us about something, I want to know what it is. As they prepared to leave, Jake took one last look at the crystal. It pulsed gently, waiting patiently for them to return. Somewhere in its crystalline memory, the songs of a dead civilization waited to be heard again, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the thing that had destroyed those singers was still out there, looking for its next target. Elena Rodriguez had never played violin in front of an alien artifact before, but she was not nervous. She had been playing music since she was 5 years old, and her violin felt like part of her body. When Jake Morrison asked her to come to the chamber, she was curious more than anything else. It really responds to music? She asked, looking at the crystal with wonder. The thing was more beautiful than Jake had described. It reminded her of the northern lights she had seen as a child, but frozen in crystal form. More than responds. Amanda Wells said, It seems to understand music. It creates its own melodies to match what it hears. Elena opened her violin case and lifted out her instrument. It was old, made by her grandfather back on Earth. The wood was dark and smooth from years of playing. She tucked it under her chin and drew her bow across the strings, checking the tuning. "What should I play?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "Whatever feels right." "The crystal seems to like everything we've tried so far." Elena closed her eyes and began to play. She chose a piece she had been working on for months, a sad melody that spoke of lost love and hope. The notes filled the chamber, echoing off the rocky walls. The crystal's response was immediate and overwhelming. The colors blazed brighter than they ever had before, swirling in patterns that matched the rhythm of Elena's playing. The crystal's own song rose to meet her violin, creating a harmony that was more beautiful than anything any of them had ever heard. But this time was different. The crystal didn't just show them images. It seemed to reach out with its music, touching Elena's mind directly. She gasped as memories that were not her own flooded into her thoughts. She saw the beings that had created the crystal, but now she knew their name. They called themselves the Ethereals, and they had been the most beautiful singers in the galaxy. Their cities were built from crystallized music, and their technology ran on harmony itself. Elena saw their last days. Ships like black holes had appeared in their sky, ships that absorbed light and sound and life itself. The Ethereals had fought back with their music, creating weapons of pure harmony that could shatter mountains. But it was not enough. The attackers called themselves the Void Hunters, and they had one purpose: to destroy all music, all art, all creativity in the universe. They saw such things as chaos that needed to be eliminated. They were machines built by a race that had forgotten how to dream. Elena watched in horror as the Void Hunters swept through ethereal cities, their weapons turning music into silence and beauty into ash. The Ethereals fought until their last breath, their singers playing, even as their world burned around them. But in their final moments, they had done something clever. They had built crystals like this one and filled them with their memories, their songs, their knowledge. They had scattered them across the galaxy, hoping that someday another musical race would find them. Elena's playing became more intense as she saw the truth. The crystal was not just a memory. It was a weapon. The Ethereals had discovered how to turn music into something that could fight the Void Hunters. They had learned to create harmonies that could disrupt the Hunters' programming, that could make the machines remember what they had lost. "Elena!" Jake called out, but she could barely hear him. The crystal's song was growing stronger, teaching her things about music she had never imagined. She saw how sound could be shaped into shields, how melody could become a sword, how harmony could heal or destroy. The images showed her the Ethereal's final battle. A group of their greatest musicians had gathered in a hall like this one, playing a song that was both beautiful and terrible. Their music had reached across space itself, striking at the Void Hunters' home fleet. For a moment, it had worked. The machines had stopped their attack, confused by the harmony they were hearing, but the Ethereals were too few, and their world was already dying. They had used their last strength to send their knowledge into the crystals, hoping that someday another race would continue their fight. Elena's bow moved across the strings faster now, her fingers dancing over the fingerboard. The crystal's song wrapped around her violin like a living thing, teaching her the musical language of the Ethereals. She was learning to speak in harmony itself. "The energy readings are off the charts," Lisa Bennett called out. "Whatever's happening, it's activating systems we didn't know existed." Captain Ryan Hayes stepped forward. "Elena, can you hear me?" "Are you all right?" Elena opened her eyes, but she kept playing. She could see her friends, but she could also see the crystal's memories overlaying the present. "I can see them," she said. "The Void Hunters. They're still out there, and they're coming." "Coming where?" Ryan asked. "Here, to human space. The crystal has been sending out signals every time we activate it. It's trying to call for help, but it's also marking our location." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "How long do we have?" Elena's playing reached a crescendo, and the crystal showed her a map of the galaxy. She could see the Void Hunter fleets, black ships moving like a plague across the stars. They were already turning toward this sector of space. "Months," Elena said, "maybe less." They can sense musical activity from light years away. Then we need to stop playing, Ryan said. We need to shut this thing down. No, Elena said bow never stopping. That's exactly what they want. The ethereals died because they fought alone. But we don't have to. The crystal is showing me how to use music as a weapon. How to turn our ships into instruments of war. Amanda Wells was frantically taking notes. This is incredible. If what you're seeing is true, then human music might be the key to defeating an enemy that has been destroying civilizations for millions of years. But why us? Jake asked. Why would our music be special? Elena smiled, even as tears ran down her face. She could feel the sadness of the ethereals, their hope that someone would carry on their fight, because we're not just musicians. We're storytellers. Our music has emotion, has meaning beyond just sound. The ethereals were pure artists, but humans, we put our hearts into our songs. The crystal's song began to fade as Elena finished her piece. The chamber was quiet except for the sound of their breathing, but the crystal continued to pulse, and Elena could feel its presence in her mind like a warm light. It's chosen us, she said softly, all of us. It's going to teach us how to fight with music, how to turn our creativity into the weapon that will save the galaxy. Captain Hayes looked at the crystal with new respect. Then we'd better start learning fast. If those void hunters are coming, we need to be ready for them. Elena tucked her violin under her chin again. Then let's begin. Claire Thompson had always been good with sounds. As the signals officer on the human fleet's main ship, she could tell the difference between a friendly message and a warning just by listening to the static. But what Elena Rodriguez was asking her to do was something completely different. You want me to turn the communication array into a musical instrument? Claire asked, looking at the technical drawings Elena had sketched out. They were sitting in the engineering bay of the UES Harmony, humanity's largest ship in this sector of space. Not just an instrument, Elena said, a weapon. The crystal showed me how the ethereals did it. They used their technology to amplify their music across space. We can do the same thing with our ships. Claire studied the drawings more carefully. They showed how the ship's communication dishes could be modified to broadcast musical frequencies instead of just radio signals. This is crazy, but it might actually work. Captain Ryan Hayes had called together the best engineers, musicians, and weapons specialists from across the human fleet. The meeting room was crowded with people who had never worked together before. Pilots sat next to composers, and weapons officers talked with violin players. The situation is simple, Ryan said to the group. We have maybe 2 months before the Void Hunters arrive in human space. We need to be ready to fight them, and music is our only weapon that might work. Dr. Amanda Wells stood up and activated the holographic display. It showed the galaxy with red dots marking where the Void Hunters had destroyed musical civilizations. They've been doing this for millions of years. Every species that creates art, that makes music, that builds beautiful things, they destroy them all. But why? Asked Lieutenant Ben Parker, a young pilot who looked confused. What's the point of destroying art? Elena answered him. Because they're afraid of it. The Void Hunters were created by a species that chose logic over creativity. They built these machines to eliminate what they saw as chaos. But music isn't chaos. It's order and emotion working together. Claire looked at her technical drawings again. If we're going to do this, we need to start with the smaller ships first. Test the theory before we modify the entire fleet. Over the next few weeks, Claire worked with Elena and the crystal to understand how musical weapons worked. The crystal was patient, showing them the same lessons over and over until they understood. It was like learning a new language, but instead of words, they were learning how to speak in harmony and melody. The first test ship was the UES Melody, a small fighter that Claire had completely rebuilt. Where it once had laser cannons, it now had harmonic projectors. Where it once had shields, it now had resonance fields that could turn enemy weapons into music. This is either brilliant or insane, said Commander Kate Sullivan, watching from the bridge of the Harmony as the Melody prepared for its first test flight. Kate was in charge of the fleet's battle plans, And she had never planned a musical battle before. The test target was an old asteroid that the mining crews had been using for practice. Claire sat in the pilot's seat of the Melody, her hands on. Controls that looked more like a piano than a weapon system. "Beginning harmonic sequence," Claire announced over the radio. She pressed a series of keys, and the ship began to sing. The sound was unlike anything the humans had ever heard from a spaceship. It was a deep, rolling melody that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The harmonic projectors on the ship's hull glowed with soft blue light as they focused the music into a beam. When the musical beam hit the asteroid, something amazing happened. The rock began to vibrate, its surface rippling like water. Then slowly it began to change shape. The music was restructuring the asteroid's molecular bonds, turning solid rock into flowing patterns of crystal. "It's working," Elena said, watching. From the bridge, "The music is changing the asteroid's structure. This is how the ethereals fought. They didn't destroy their enemies, they transformed them." But the test also revealed a problem. The moment the melody started playing, every ship in the fleet detected it. The music was so powerful that it could be heard across the entire system. "The Void Hunters will know we're here the moment we start fighting," Kate said. "We won't have the element of surprise." "Then we don't fight from hiding," Elena said. "We fight from everywhere at once." The crystal showed me that the ethereal's greatest weapon wasn't a single ship or a single song. It was when their entire civilization sang together. Over the next month, the human fleet transformed itself. Engineers worked around the clock to modify every ship, from the largest battleships to the smallest scouts. Each ship became a different instrument in a grand orchestra. The big ships became the drums and bass, their deep harmonic projectors providing the rhythm of battle. The medium ships became the strings and horns, carrying the melody lines that would guide the fleet's movements. The fighters became the high notes, the piccolos and violins that would dance between enemy ships. Claire worked with composers from across human space, creating battle songs that were both beautiful and deadly. Each piece of music was designed to do something different in combat. Some songs would disrupt enemy electronics. Others would create shields of solid sound. The most powerful songs could transform matter itself. "We're not just building weapons," Elena told Jake one evening as they watched the fleet practice. "We're building a new kind of warfare. One based on beauty instead of destruction." Jake nodded, but he looked worried. What if it's not enough? What if the Void Hunters are too strong? Elena touched the crystal fragment she now wore around her neck. The main crystal had created smaller pieces for each of the key humans, allowing them to stay connected to the ethereal knowledge. "Then we'll do what the ethereals couldn't. We'll make them remember what they lost." The scout ships started reporting strange readings at the edge of human space. Dark objects were moving between the stars, objects that seemed to absorb light. And radio waves. The Void Hunters were getting closer. "How long until they arrive?" Ryan asked during the daily briefing. 3 weeks, reported Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, the fleet's sensor specialist. "Maybe less. They're moving faster than we expected." Claire looked up from her workstation. "We need more time. The modifications aren't complete on half the fleet." "Then we work faster," Kate said. "Every ship that can sing will sing. Every human who can make music will make music. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every species that ever created something beautiful." Elena stood up and walked to the window that looked out at the fleet. Hundreds of ships floated in space, each one glowing with the soft light of harmonic projectors. They looked like stars that had learned to sing. "They're coming to destroy us because we make music," she said. "But that's exactly why we're going to win." The Void Hunters came out of deep space like a storm made of metal and darkness. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from the bridge of the Hughes Harmony as hundreds of black ships appeared on the sensors. Each one was the size of a city, and they moved with the cold precision of machines that had been killing for millions of years. "They're targeting the outer colonies first," reported Lieutenant Sarah Hayes. "New Haven and Prosperity Station are under attack." Kate felt her heart sink. New Haven was home to 2 million people, including many families of the fleet personnel. But she had to focus on the battle plan. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. Begin Formation Symphony 1. Across the human fleet, ships moved into position. The large battleships formed the center, their massive harmonic projectors glowing with deep blue light. The cruisers spread out in a circle around them, and the fighters took positions at the edges like dancers waiting for their cue. Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Harmony, her violin ready. The crystal fragment around her neck was warm against her skin, connecting her to the ancient knowledge of the ethereals. She could feel the fear and excitement of every human in the fleet, all of them waiting for her to begin. "Elena," Kate said quietly, "it's time." Elena lifted her violin and began to play. The song was one that Claire Thompson had composed, a melody that spoke of home and hope and the refusal to give up. The moment her bow touched the strings, every ship in the fleet joined in. The sound was incredible. The battleships provided a deep, rolling bass that seemed to come from the heart of space itself. The cruisers added harmony lines that wove between, the melody like silver threads. The fighters sang in high, clear voices that danced above it all, but this wasn't just music. As the fleet sang together, their harmonic projectors created waves of sound that traveled faster than light. The waves struck the Void Hunter ships, and for the first time in millions of years, the machines heard something they had forgotten existed. The effect was immediate. The Void Hunter ships slowed their advance, their formations becoming loose and uncertain. On the bridges of the black ships, mechanical minds that had not felt confusion for eons suddenly didn't know what to do. "It's working," Claire said from her position at the modified weapons console. "Their attack patterns are breaking down." But the Void Hunters were not defenseless. They had weapons that could destroy planets, and they began to use them. Beams of pure darkness shot out from their ships, striking at the human fleet. When the darkness touched the human ships, it tried to drain the music from them, to turn their songs into silence. "Defensive harmony," Kate ordered. "Pattern Delta." The fleet's formation shifted, and their music changed. Now they sang a song of protection, their harmonic fields creating barriers of solid sound around each ship. The Void Hunter's darkness struck the barriers and shattered like glass hitting a wall. Elena played harder, her violin crying out with a melody that told the story of humanity's journey to the stars. The crystal around her neck grew brighter, showing her new ways to shape the music. She could see how the ethereals had fought their last battle, and she was determined not to make the same mistakes. "Focus fire on the command ship," Kate ordered. "The big one in the center." Claire's fingers danced across her console, directing the fleet's musical assault. The song became sharp and focused, a spear of harmony that drove straight at the largest Void Hunter ship. The vessel was 3 times the size of the Harmony, its black hull covered in weapons that had destroyed 1,000 worlds. The musical spear struck the command ship, and something unexpected happened. The ship's hull began to change, its black surface rippling like water. Deep inside the vessel, circuits that had been dormant for millions of years began to spark with new life. "What's happening to it?" Jake Morrison asked. He was on the bridge now, helping to coordinate the attack. Elena could see it through the crystal's connection. "It's remembering. The Void Hunters weren't always destroyers. They were created by a species that loved beauty once. The music is making them remember what they lost." The command ship's weapons stopped firing. Its hull continued to change, shifting from black to silver to something that looked almost like crystal. Other Void Hunter ships began to change too, their formations breaking apart as their crews struggled with memories they had not accessed in eons, but not all of them were changing. The newer ships, the ones that had been built after their creators had completely forgotten about art, continued their attack. They had no memories of beauty to awaken. "We've got about half of them confused," Kate said, watching the battle displays. "But the other half are regrouping. They're learning to resist the music," Elena nodded. She had expected this. The crystal had shown her that the ethereals faced the same problem. "Then we give them something they can't resist." "Claire, are you ready for the final movement?" Claire looked at her console, where the most complex musical sequence they had created was waiting. This is going to use every bit of power we have. If it doesn't work, we won't have anything left to fight with. It'll work, Elena said. She could feel the presence of the ethereals in the crystal, their ancient voices joining with her own. Trust me. The fleet began to sing the final movement, a song that was both funeral dirge and celebration. It told the story of every civilization. The Void Hunters had destroyed, but it also told the story of hope, of the refusal to let beauty die. The music grew stronger than anything the humans had created before. It reached across space, touching every ship in the battle. The Void Hunters that were already changing began to sing along, their mechanical voices adding harmony to the human song, but the song did more than just convert the enemy. It reached back through time, touching the home worlds of the Void Hunters' creators. On planets that had been silent for millions of years, dormant machines began to wake up. Art galleries that had been sealed away opened their doors. Musical instruments that had been forbidden began to play again. "My God," Amanda Wells whispered, watching the readings from the archaeological sensors. "It's working across the entire galaxy. The song is awakening art everywhere." The battle was turning. More Void Hunter ships were changing, their crews remembering what they had been built to protect instead of destroy. The newer ships tried to retreat, but they were surrounded by their own transformed fleet. Elena played the final notes of the song, her violin singing with the voices of the ethereals and the hope of humanity. The crystal around her neck blazed with light as she felt the presence of every musical civilization that had ever existed. When the song ended, the battle was over. Half the Void Hunter fleet had been transformed, their ships now gleaming with the same crystal structure as the ethereal artifact. The other half had surrendered, their crews overwhelmed by the awakening of emotions they had never been designed to feel. Status report, Kate said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and relief. "All colonies are secure," Sarah reported. "The Void Hunters have ceased their attack. They're asking to talk?" Elena lowered her violin and smiled. "Then let's teach them how to sing." 6 months after the battle, Elena Rodriguez stood in what had once been the command bridge of a Void Hunter ship. Now it looked more like a concert hall than a warship. The black walls had been replaced with crystal that sang softly when touched. And where weapon controls had once been, there were now musical instruments from a dozen different worlds. The being that had once been the ship's commander stood beside her. It was tall and made of metal and light, but its movements were graceful now instead of mechanical. It had chosen the name Harmony for itself, leaving behind whatever designation it had carried as a destroyer. "The transformation is almost complete," Harmony said in a voice like wind chimes. "My crew has learned to create instead of destroy. But we still remember what we did before. The guilt is difficult." Elena nodded. She had been working with the transformed Void Hunters for months, helping them understand emotions they had never been designed to feel. Guilt means you understand what you did wrong. That's the first step toward making it right. Through the crystal windows of the ship, Elena could see the construction project that had become the focus of the entire galaxy. Where the battle had taken place, thousands of ships were working together to build something new. Humans, transformed Void Hunters, and representatives from dozens of other species were creating the largest musical instrument ever conceived. It was called the Galactic Symphony, and it was designed to reach every corner of the galaxy at once. When it was finished, it would broadcast the gift of music to every world, every species, every corner of space where silence had ruled for too long. "Elena," came Jake Morrison's voice over the communication system, "we need you at the central platform. The ethereal crystal is ready for the final installation." Elena made her way through the ship's corridors, which were now filled with former weapons officers learning to play instruments. Some of them were terrible at it, but they were trying, and that was what mattered. The central platform of the Galactic Symphony was a massive structure, big enough to hold a small city. At its heart was a chamber where the original ethereal crystal would be placed, but this crystal was different now. Fed by months of human music and transformed Void Hunter harmony, it had grown from a single artifact into something that pulsed with the combined creativity of dozens of species. Dr. Amanda Wells was there when Elena arrived, along with Claire Thompson and most of the original team that had discovered the crystal. Amanda was practically bouncing with excitement. "Look at it," she said, pointing to the crystal. "It's not just storing memories anymore, it's creating new ones. Every song we've played, every melody we've taught the transformed hunters, it's all becoming part of a living musical library." Claire was making final adjustments to the symphony's control systems. "When we activate this, it's going to send a musical pulse to every inhabited system in the galaxy. Species that have never heard music will suddenly understand what they've been missing. And species that have been hiding their music will know it's safe to sing again," Elena added. Captain Ryan Hayes, now promoted to Admiral of the new Galactic Music Fleet, joined them on the platform. "Are we ready for the test?" Elena looked around at all the faces watching her. Humans, transformed Void Hunters, even some species that had come out of hiding after hearing about the battle. All of them were waiting for her to begin. She lifted her violin, the same instrument her grandfather had made back on Earth. It seemed like a lifetime ago that she had first played for the crystal in that mining chamber. Now she was about to play for the entire galaxy. "Before we start," Elena said, "I want everyone to understand what we're doing here. We're not just making music. We're announcing to the universe that creativity will never be silenced again. That beauty has a place among the stars." She placed the violin under her chin and began to play. The song was simple at first, just a melody that spoke of hope and new beginnings. But as the crystal responded, adding its own harmony, other musicians joined in. The transformed Void Hunters sang in their new mechanical voices. Human orchestra members added layers of strings and brass. Representatives from the Crystalline Coalition added their chiming tones. Slowly, the simple melody became something greater. The Galactic Symphony amplified their music, sending it racing across space at faster-than-light speeds. On worlds throughout the galaxy, beings who had never heard music suddenly stopped what they were doing and listened. On other worlds, hidden orchestras and secret singers finally felt safe to play their songs openly. But the most amazing thing happened on the Void Hunters' homeworlds. Planets that had been silent for millions of years suddenly burst into song. Art galleries that had been sealed away opened their doors. Statues that had been broken were repaired by machines that remembered beauty. Gardens that had been destroyed began to grow again. "It's working," reported Lieutenant Sarah Hayes from the communication center. "We're getting responses from everywhere. Species we didn't even know existed are sending us music." Elena played harder, her violin singing with joy as she felt the galaxy awakening around her. The crystal showed her visions of worlds coming alive with sound. Desert planets where the wind was learning to carry melodies. Ocean worlds where the waves were learning to keep rhythm. Even the empty spaces between stars seemed to hum with new music. Harmony. The former Void Hunter commander approached the platform. "Elena Rodriguez," it said in its wind chime voice, "my people owe you a debt we can never repay. You gave us back our souls." "You don't owe me anything," Elena said, never stopping her playing. "Music belongs to everyone. That's what makes it so powerful." The song reached its crescendo, and Elena could feel the presence of the original ethereals in the crystal. They had waited so long for this moment, for music to return to the galaxy they had once filled with song. Their voices joined the symphony, ancient melodies weaving through modern harmonies. As the final notes rang out across space, Elena lowered her violin and looked around at the faces surrounding her. Humans and machines, creatures of crystal and beings of pure energy, all of them united by the simple act of making music together. "So what happens now?" Jake asked. Elena smiled and touched the crystal fragment around her neck. It was warm with the joy of the ethereals, finally at peace after millions of years of waiting. "Now we teach the galaxy how to sing, every world. Every species, every corner of space that wants to learn. We make sure that no one ever tries to silence the music again." Admiral Hayes nodded. The Galactic Music Fleet stands ready. We'll protect any world that wants to create, and we'll teach any species that wants to learn. Elena looked out at the stars, which seemed brighter now, as if they were learning to twinkle in rhythm. Somewhere out there, new songs were being born. Somewhere out there, species that had never known beauty were discovering what they had been missing. The galaxy would never be silent again.